I thought I lost her in the alley. But then, from the absolute darkness of the empty subway station, the dancing started again. People warn you about walking alone at night. They tell you to watch out for footsteps behind you. They tell you to keep your keys between your fingers, to stay in the light, to never look down. But they never warn you about what is waiting quietly ahead. They never tell you what to do when the threat is not hiding in the shadows, but standing right out in the open, under the sickly yellow glow of a street lamp. It was 2 in the morning. I was walking back to my apartment after a late shift at the library. It was one of those miserable autumn nights where the rain did not pour, but instead fell in a constant freezing drizzle, the kind of rain that slowly seeps through your coat, chilling you to the bone. The streets of the city were completely dead. No cars, no stray dogs, just the rhythmic, wet slapping of my own boots against the slick pavement. I lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood on the edge of the city, a place where the streetlights were spaced too far apart, leaving long stretches of pitch-black darkness between them. I remember the silence being almost suffocating, just the rain and my breath. I was tired, my muscles aching, my mind completely numb. I just wanted to get home, lock my heavy wooden door, and collapse into bed. I turned the corner onto Elm Street. The street stretched out before me, empty, glistening under the sparse street lamps. But halfway down the block, right under the 3rd street lamp, I saw something. A shadow. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, or maybe someone waiting for a cab. But as I kept walking, my eyes adjusting to the dim light, the silhouette became clearer. It was a woman. She was wearing what looked like a traditional folk dress, something completely out of place for this part of town, let alone at 2 in the morning in the freezing rain. But it was not what she was wearing that made my blood run cold. It was what she was doing. She was dancing. Not a modern dance, not swaying to the music of earphones. It was a strange, erratic, twisting motion, like a waltz, but broken. Her arms were raised, her body spinning slowly, her feet moving in a precise, almost mechanical rhythm. Step, step, pivot. Step, step, pivot. There was no music. The only sound was the rain, and the faint, rhythmic click, clack of her shoes hitting the wet asphalt. Click, clack, click, clack. It echoed down the empty street, a sound so out of place that it made my stomach churn. I froze. My brain tried to process what I was seeing. Maybe she was drunk, maybe she was high, but the movements were too controlled, too deliberate. The air felt suddenly heavy, thick with an unspoken dread. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to turn around, to run back to the library, to call the police.
No!
But the logical
No,
part of my brain,
anything.
the foolish part,
This isn't real!
told me I was overreacting. It is just a strange woman, I thought. I will just cross the street, keep my head down, and walk past her. I gripped the straps of my backpack, took a deep breath, and forced my feet to move. I stepped off the curb and crossed to the other side of the road, hugging the edge
Please
of the
don't let
dark,
them find me.
overgrown yards. I kept my eyes fixed on the pavement, trying to ignore the twisting shadow in my peripheral vision. I walked, and the clicking of her shoes continued. Click, clack, step, pivot. I was getting closer. The smell of wet asphalt and rotting leaves filled my nose. I could hear her dress swishing through the damp air. My heart was hammering against my ribs, so loud I was sure she could hear it. I was almost parallel to her now.
Don't look,
Just
don't
keep
look.
walking,
Just
I
keep
told
moving.
myself.
Please
Do
make it
not
stop.
look. Do not engage. But humans are cursed with a morbid curiosity. As I passed her, I could not help it. I turned my head, and I looked. She was not old, but her face was obscured by the shadows and her tangled, wet hair. But in that split second, as my eyes met hers, the dancing stopped. It did not slow down. It just stopped, instantly, freezing mid-motion. The sudden silence was deafening. The clicking ceased. The swishing of the fabric died. She stood there, perfectly still, her body contorted in that unnatural pose, one arm raised, one foot suspended in the air, and her head snapped towards me. The movement was so fast, so violent, it did not look human. Her neck cracked loudly in the quiet night. From beneath the tangle of wet hair, I saw her eyes. They were wide, unblinking, devoid of any light or sanity. They were completely empty. And then, slowly, her lips curled upward. It was not a normal smile. It stretched far too wide, stretching the skin tightly across her cheekbones, exposing a row of pale teeth in the darkness. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated malice. A cold sweat broke out across my forehead. My lungs seized up. I could not breathe. I was paralyzed, trapped in the headlights of a predator. We stood there, locked in that terrifying standoff, for what felt like an eternity. The rain continued to fall, sliding down her grotesque, smiling face. Then, she lowered her raised arm. She slowly lowered her suspended foot to the ground. Click. And her body pivoted to face me completely. She took a step towards me. It was not a walking step. It was a dancing step. A slow, deliberate, mocking slide forward. My paralysis broke. The primal terror took over. I did not think. I just turned and ran. I sprinted down the wet street, my boots slipping on the asphalt, my lungs burning with every desperate gasp for air. I did not look back. I ran towards the end of the block, intending to turn onto my street, but panic clouded my judgment. I took a sharp left into a narrow, unlit alleyway between two brick buildings. It was a shortcut to the main avenue, a place with more lights, maybe a passing car. I plunged into the absolute darkness of the alley, tripping over garbage bags, my hands scraping against the rough brick walls. I ran until my legs felt like lead, until I burst out onto the other side, gasping, heaving, my heart exploding in my chest. I stopped, leaning against a cold brick wall, staring back into the pitch-black mouth of the alley. I listened. Nothing, just the rain. I thought I had lost her. I thought I was safe. I wiped the freezing rain from my face, my hands trembling violently. The main avenue was just ahead, and beyond that, the entrance to the old subway station. I started walking again, my pace frantic, constantly glancing over my shoulder. I reached the subway entrance. The metal gates were usually pulled shut by midnight, but tonight, one of them was left half open, a dark, inviting descent into the underground. I slipped through the gap, desperate to get off the open street, away from the rain and the shadows. I hurried down the wide concrete stairs, descending into the dimly lit, echoey silence of the station. I reached the bottom landing, the air thick with the smell of ozone and old dust. I stopped to catch my breath, feeling a false sense of security wash over me. The thick concrete walls seemed like a fortress. I closed my eyes, leaning against the cold tile. But then, from the top of the stairs, coming from the street I had just fled, click, clack, the rhythmic, unnatural sound of hard soles hitting concrete. It echoed down the stairwell, amplified by the tiled walls, a slow, mocking rhythm. Click, clack. The dancing had started again, and she was coming down. I thought the underground would hide me. I was wrong. It only amplified her. The sound drifted down the wide, empty stairwell, bouncing off the dirty white tiles. Click, clack, click, clack. It was slower now, more deliberate. She was not running. She knew exactly where I went. The flickering neon lights above me buzzed with an irritating hum, casting long, distorted shadows across the deserted platform. I backed away from the stairs, my wet shoes squeaking softly against the linoleum floor. I clamped my hands over my mouth, terrified that the harsh rasping of my own breath would give away my position. The air down here was heavy, smelling of stale urine, damp concrete, and metallic dust. It felt like a tomb. I scurried behind a massive concrete pillar near the edge of the platform, pressing my back flat against the cold surface. And I waited. The clicking grew louder. It reached the bottom of the stairs. Then, the rhythm changed. It was no longer a steady walk. It was the waltz again. Slide, step, tap. Slide, step, tap. The echo was maddening. Because of the curved ceiling, I could not tell exactly where she was. The sound seemed to come from everywhere at once.
What is that
It
thing?
crawled along the walls, slithered across the tracks, and whispered directly into my ears. My heart was pounding so hard against my ribs that it physically hurt. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying for the sound to fade away, praying for her to turn around and leave. But the horrific dance continued. Slide, step, tap. It was moving closer. She was moving down the platform. I slowly opened my eyes and peeked around the edge of the thick pillar. The platform was a long corridor of flickering light and deep shadows. And there she was. She was dancing along the yellow warning line at the edge of the drop-off. Her head was tilted back at an unnatural angle, staring up at the ceiling as she spun. Her arms moved in fluid, terrifying sweeps. Every time her hard sole struck the floor, the sound cracked like a whip in the silent station. I pulled my head back, pressing myself as hard as I could into the concrete. I felt completely trapped. There was no other exit on this side of the platform. The only way out was back up those stairs, and she was between me and them. Slide, step, tap. The sound was deafening now. She was right on the other side of my pillar. I held my breath until my lungs burned, my blood running ice cold. I squeezed my hands into fists, my fingernails biting into my palms. I waited for her face to suddenly appear around the corner, for that ripped, impossible smile to greet me in the dark. The tapping stopped. Silence fell over the station, thick and suffocating. The neon light above me buzzed. I waited 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. Had she moved past me? Was she just standing there, inches away, listening to my racing heart? I could not take the agony of not knowing. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, I turned my head to look around the pillar again. Empty. The space next to the pillar was completely empty. I let out a shaky, silent gasp. Where did she go? I scanned the long, empty platform. Nothing. Just the flickering lights and the yellow line. And then, I heard a new sound. It did not come from the platform. It came from down below, from the tracks. A soft, metallic scrape. I stepped away from the pillar and looked over the edge, down into the pitch-black trench of the subway tracks. At first, I saw nothing but garbage and rusted rails. Then, movement. Down in the trench, crawling on all fours across the filthy gravel, was the woman. Her head snapped up, and she looked right at me. She was not smiling anymore. Her mouth was open in a silent, horrific scream, and she began to scramble up the side of the platform, her long fingers clawing at the concrete lip. Panic exploded in my chest. I scrambled backwards, stumbling over my own feet. The stairs were too far. She was pulling herself up, moving with the terrifying, jerky speed of a spider. I had no choice. I turned away from the stairs and bolted toward the far end of the platform, plunging into the dark maintenance corridor that led away from the main terminal. Have you ever had to hold your breath so long that your lungs burn, knowing that one exhale will cost you your life? I ran blindly into the maintenance tunnel. The air here was even colder, smelling sharply of rust, old grease, and rotting stagnant water. There were no lights in this section, only the faint, sickly glow bleeding in from the main platform behind me. I dragged my hand along the rough concrete wall, feeling my way through the absolute blackness. My boots squished softly in the unseen puddles. Every step I took felt painfully loud. And then, from the mouth of the tunnel behind me, I heard it, a wet, heavy thud. She had dropped down from the platform. I panicked, running my hands frantically over the wall until my fingers caught on a cold metal handle. It was a heavy industrial door, likely a utility closet for the transit workers. I yanked it open with all my remaining strength. The rusted hinges let out a quiet whine. I slipped inside and pulled the heavy door shut, pulling the interior handle tight so the latch would not click and give away my position. The closet was pitch black and incredibly cramped, no bigger than a coffin. I pressed my back against a tangle of thick, dusty cables, gripping the handle with both hands. There was a narrow horizontal vent at eye level on the door. Through the dusty slits, I could see a tiny sliver of the tunnel outside. I waited. I prayed to whatever was listening. Then came the sound. It was not the rhythmic clicking of her shoes this time. It was a high-pitched, agonizing screech. Screech. She was dragging something sharp, a long blade or a jagged piece of metal, against the corrugated iron walls of the tunnel. And she was moving to the rhythm of that broken, mocking waltz. Scrape, step, tap. Scrape, step, tap. The horrific noise echoed in the confined space, vibrating right into my teeth. The shadow slowly eclipsed the faint sliver of light outside my door. She was getting closer. I stopped breathing. My lungs screamed for oxygen, my chest tightening with an agonizing, fiery burn. I squeezed my eyes shut, tears of pure, primal terror streaming down my cold face. She stopped right outside the closet. The metallic scraping ceased. For a moment, there was nothing but the deafening silence of the underground. Then, I heard it. A wet, rattling, excited breathing, coming from just inches away, right on the other side of the thin metal door. She knew I was in here. I could smell the damp, rotting stench of her clothes slipping through the vents. I was completely paralyzed, trapped in a steel box, waiting for the door to be ripped open. Suddenly, she began to dance again. But she did not move away. She danced violently in place, her body thrashing against the door, slamming into the metal with heavy, dull thuds. Thump, thump, thump. The entire closet shook with the force of her erratic movements. Her distorted, unnatural shadow danced wildly across the narrow vent slits, blocking out the light with every frantic spin. I clamped my hands over my ears, biting down hard on my own arm to keep from screaming out loud.
Turn the light off.
I tasted blood in my mouth. I do not know how long she kept it up. It felt like hours. It was a calculated psychological torture, slowly tearing away the last shreds of my sanity in the dark. And then, a deep, rhythmic vibration began to build from the concrete floor beneath my feet. A low rumble that quickly grew into a deafening roar. The first morning train. The ground shook violently as the massive steel cars screeched into the station above, the mechanical noise completely drowning out the nightmare outside my door. The heavy thudding instantly stopped. I stayed curled in that freezing, dark corner long after the train departed, long after the station began to fill with the distant, muffled voices of early morning commuters. I was entirely numb. It was a transit maintenance worker who finally found me a few hours later, violently prying my rigid, bleeding fingers off the door handle. I did not say a single word to him or the police officers who arrived later. I just walked out into the harsh, blinding morning light, feeling like a hollow shell of the person I was the night before. The police searched the tunnels, of course. They found absolutely nothing. No security footage, no muddy footprints on the platform, no strange woman in a folk dress.
It's okay.
They told me it was likely
What
a
you
severe
experienced
panic
was just a
attack
panic
brought on by
attack.
sleep
There's
deprivation
nothing
and
to worry
stress.
about.
They said my mind played a trick on me in the dark, but I know what I saw. I know the smell of that rotting rain, and I know the sound of that blade scraping against the wall. I moved out of that suburban apartment the very next week. I live on the 8th floor of a downtown building now, in an apartment with heavy security cameras and 3 deadbolts on the front door. But the absolute terror never really leaves you. It just changes its shape, hiding in the corners of your mind. Sometimes, late at night, when the city traffic dies down and my apartment is completely silent, I lie awake in the dark. I stare blankly at the heavy locks on my door, and I listen. I listen because I know that somewhere out there, in the freezing rain, she is still dancing. And my greatest, most paralyzing fear is that one night, the rhythmic clicking of those shoes will not be coming from the street below. It will be coming from my hallway. If you ever find yourself walking alone at night and you see a woman dancing under a street lamp, do not look at her face. Do not stop to watch. Just run and pray she does not decide to follow you into the dark. Have you ever experienced a terror that you could not logically explain to anyone else? Share your stories in the comments below and make sure to subscribe to Lost Horror. You will need the company because the story I have for you next week will make you terrified to ever turn out your lights again.